Hey everybody, this is your boy John, and today's episode is going to be about Star Wars fandomness, really more the overview of it. So hello there, listeners. We want to make sure that you're listening to this episode because it's going to be very knowledge-based regarding this Star Wars, geekdom, if you want to call it. So stay tuned. Hey, so it's weird, Matt. When it comes down to, Star Wars, if Disney just likes to get as much, I don't know, like powerhouses. You know what I'm saying? Like, because they have Disney. Well, let me rephrase that. Disney, of course, owns Disney, so we've already established that. But like, Marvel, they do.
What the hell?
When did this happen? No, but like, you look at Disney, right? So like, when they bought Marvel, it was it was a big thing. And of course, once they bought, if I'm not mistaken, Star Wars before Marvel, or was it after? See, I don't know. That's the part I'm trying to remember now.
I want to say it was before, but
for me, it's like, I don't know, like Star Wars, of course, has always been a big hit, right? So it's way up there with like Star Trek, that same fandomness. I mean, 4, 5, and 6. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, back in the day, if you didn't know what Star Wars was, I think you'd be living under a rock at that point.
yeah, I mean, John, and I know you're huge into Marvel and you've always kind of been a Marvel fan. For me, like far above Marvel, I think I've always been more attached to Star Wars. Like Star Wars was always one of those franchises that like I loved growing up. Like 4, 5, and 6. I remember, I was obviously very young, being born in 79, like these movies were just coming out in theater. So being a baby, I'm not going to go see them. But when I was in high school, when they were remastered digitally, they were coming back out into the theaters.
I mean, technically, I will admit to you that, growing up, my dad was a big Star Wars fan. I mean, he could tell you, trust me, him and I have had a conversation about this, but he literally owned like a lot of the original collectible like figurines and stuff. I mean, he could tell literally, this is why at some point down the road, folks, he will be on about, Star Wars as well. And he can tell you kind of the things that he's collected, but I can tell you he had, I would say in like a general collection, he had about like almost $500,000 worth of these figurines that my grandmother decided when he was in boot camp that she was just going to toss them. And she did. I know. And she was so mad. And he told me, he's like, I could have had $500,000 and all this shit was thrown away because your grandmother, I was like, listen, I understand it is what it is now. But I mean, we looked at how much a lot of that stuff was. He actually had I think it was Boba Fett. Okay. It was the one with the rocket. So I know it's a very rare collectible item.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about it. And we looked it up exactly how much it was. It was like $125,000 or something like that. I was like, holy shit. But anyways.
That'll ruin your day.
No, I know. And so like, so my point is like, growing up, we actually did go see Phantom Menace when it came out originally. I remember watching it as a kid. So granted, I was like 7 or 8, give or take, if I had, 6 or 7 probably around that time. But, we watched it. So I watched, 1, 2, and 3, of course, in theaters. So, growing up, it was kind of like, okay, we kind of watched it as a household. And of course, he was like, okay, well, now you also got to watch 4, 5, and 6. Because that's all we knew, right? Because we didn't see, 7, 8, 9 until way, later down the road. But it's like, Star Wars as a whole, once Disney bought, Star Wars, I feel like it depends, right? Because like, when Lucas technically owned it, he had, and it was almost like he had a lot more, of course, freedom to do it, but like there was something special about it, in a sense, because like, when Disney did their thing, because, everything Disneyfied doesn't always mean it's gold, because like that's where I feel like, especially with the newer movies, like 7, was, I would say for the newer stuff, was the best selling out of the, 8 and 9 per se. 7 was actually I think in the top 5 of all time for like best selling wise for movies.
Yeah.
It hit over $1 billion, dollars or whatever. So like at that time it was great. but like, you see like 8 and 9, and it looked like shit. So like, 8, I don't even want to get started on 8. That one was a fucking shit show as it was, but like 9, don't get me wrong, it was good, but it wasn't the same hype as 7. You know what I mean? Like 7 really did a lot more, but for me, it was like, when you could, watch, 4, 5, and 6, of course, like that's like, that right there is a cult classic on its own. Like literally, you wouldn't even need anything else. Like you could just say, oh, 4, 5, and 6, call it a day. Because that was the original saga. That was the original trilogy of like, oh, that's what it was. But I understood that, Lucas technically, I know why he did 4, 5, and 6 the way he did. It was because of the, technology that he had at that time. Because 1, 2, and 3, he couldn't have done it, back then. The technology wasn't there for what it was. And so, excuse me. So like for what it was, 4, 5, and 6, it was, the way it was. But I don't know, it just had a different feeling to it. You know what I mean? It had more of a special meaning behind it, And so like, it was weird when you saw like Darth Vader, really, or in this case, Anakin, in the prequels, and you're like, oh, that's what he looks like when he's young, and then you got to see him kind of go into Darth Vader, but then, in the older, or really the 4, 5, and 6, it's like, you're like, this is a little weird. Why, I think it was in 6, right? When he takes off his actual helmet. Yeah. And you see him and he's just all pale and he's, decrepit looking in a sense. And you're just like, yeah, that's not who I thought it would have been.
Yeah. And I mean, the change that they made too, in the initial releases of it showed, his Force Ghost at the end as the older guy.
Right. In the original.
And then when they updated it, all of a sudden it was Hayden Christensen as the, Anakin's Force Ghost, which was kind of like, wait, what?
I mean, I guess in some ways it makes...
How does all of a sudden his Force Ghost become young Anakin again?
Well, if you think about it, because if that was really how, we saw him now, you know what I'm saying? Because like, I understand, in the original, yes, you're gonna use the older, guy that was playing him originally, but like, I don't know.
But they didn't show, Obi-Wan.
No, technically, right, as Ewan McGregor, like doing it. No, I understand what you're saying, because like that would have made more sense, in a sense. Like if you were going to update everybody, then you would have had to do him as well.
Yeah.
So I get it. I do understand that piece, but I don't know. That's Disney for you. That's the problem. Yeah. Disney will do whatever they want. But like, looking at the Lucasfilms though, George he's a genius on his own. Okay. Like he's like up there with, Spielberg, like I'm just trying to think of like James Cameron, like that level of genius directorness in a sense. Like, granted, he made the books, he made, the series as a whole, but like for him directing and doing all this, think about it. Imagine just like sitting home one day and you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna write a random book on like sci-fi fantasy. And now it's going to be like a world phenomenon that has sold billions of dollars, and it could be a slew of things, right? But then, like, I'm pretty sure he sold it to Disney. I think it was like $1 billion or $2 or something like that. It was a lot of money that he sold it to.
It was a lot of money,
and he got, of course, all of it. And I'm sitting there like, you don't have to work for the rest of your life, man. And you just got all that money to literally just sit there. Now, granted, I know he does occasionally, meet up with, I guess in this case, Dave Filoni, and the guy who kind of, we'll say, took over that kind of role, kind of like the Kevin Feige of, Marvel in this case for really Star Wars. But like, I understand he kind of somewhat participates, but not really in a sense.
Yeah, he's been a creative consultant. Especially on the sequels, he's been a creative consultant. But he created Lucasfilm. He also created Industrial Light and Magic, which is a huge studio that does effects. They don't do just effects for
wait a minute
Star Wars, but they do like all kinds of movies.
I didn't know. So THX. So like the symbol, like I remember the symbol like back in the day. I didn't know that he created that.
Yeah,
that was a huge like I don't know if it's like a producing company or some kind of like I don't know
it's like audio.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
but that's crazy.
Like surround sound audio. Yeah,
but that was in most movies. Like even, growing up and doing all that. That's
And
crazy.
that was one of the big things in Star Wars. Like, when the Lucasfilm thing came up, that THX thing came up.
We came right away. That's crazy. I didn't know that. I didn't even think about it like that.
And then, LucasArts, which is their video game division.
Right. I mean, so like when you look at like Battlefield or,
Battlefront.
Oh shit, you're right.
Yeah.
Battlefront, not Battlefield. No, I'm thinking also of
But they have like,
the Old Night Republic. What was it? Old Night Republic? No.
Rogue Squadron or something like that.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking of, what was it? The Old Republic?
Knights of the Old Republic.
Knights of the Republic. Okay. So like those kinds of games and stuff like that. So like even the actually, ironically enough, they also remastered the new or the old Battlefront games that they had as well, because those were the ones I remember playing, and those were like the shit. Like
those were awesome, yeah.
Well, because you were going around, you could do anything you want, really. You could go into like all the different like really scenes in the movies, and like you were like playing as like,
and you could play the characters.
Yeah, you can actually play them, and it was interesting enough to be able to.
And the newer ones just didn't have the same
like the graphics.
Feel. The graphics were great.
I think the problem is like if you could have had that same style from the beginning Battlefronts,
yeah,
and then had that same concept and everything, but like had the graphics of now, bro, this would have been amazing. But they didn't do it. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think with George Lucas, like there was something special there because you have a guy who created Star Wars. He created Lucasfilm, and he created Industrial Light and Magic to create Star Wars. Not just Star Wars, but Indiana Jones, because he did them kind of back to back. And
wait a minute, hold on. So did he help with Indiana Jones?
He did.
Wait, I didn't think it was him that made Indiana Jones though.
He did, and it was Steven Spielberg, but George Lucas.
Okay, so he helped. Oh, okay, all right. So that's why I was curious, because I didn't know that.
Because it was Industrial Light and Magic that was a studio
that did it. Okay,
that did the effects for it. But you have this guy who created Star Wars. He also created Industrial Light and Magic, which, with the practical effect episode, like we talked a lot about it.
I mean, technically, I would say he was kind of like a pioneer of it in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, all of the ships and the things that they created just to make the movie, like he held such a tight creative control over it because it was something that he did, and there was like that exclusivity to Star Wars that I think made it special. Where when you watched 4, 5, and 6, when you watched 1, 2, and 3, you knew that it was George Lucas.
I mean, when you hear the scream, the the random thing,
the Wilhelm scream.
Well, yes, I mean, granted, I know it was more famous back in the day of like cowboys. It was like the Western kind of thing, but like he made it more of a thing because of Star Wars and so forth. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't a thing in movies that they didn't do already, but like you knew that scream because Star Wars already did something with it. And so, Star Wars, I just think, as a whole, looking at all the characters and like the storylines and all this, I mean, there's a reason why when he created it was like a vast universe that literally, I mean, granted, he did the 4, 5, and 6, knowing, like I said, with the technology that he had, it was never going to be advanced at that time to have 1, 2, and 3. But, looking at the characters at the time, to me, it would be weird. Now think about it. Let's say he did do 1, 2, and 3.
Well, when he did 4, 5, and 6, he had said many times he has a 1, 2, and 3, and he has a 7, 8, and 9. But it was the technology at the time that if he was going to do it, he wanted to make sure he could do it the right.
No,
way.
But think about it like this. Now, what if he did do 1, 2, and 3 back in the 70s and 80s in a sense, and then he did 4, 5, and 6? Like, imagine the actors that he would have chosen, to play those. You know what I'm saying? Like to play those roles, and then like switch it to the 4, 5, and 6 now. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be weird to kind of think of how they would, or really how he would cast those people.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think you'd be looking at a different set of a whole different like kind of set of movies. But I mean, the idea for 1, 2, and 3 was already a concept for George when after he did 4, 5, and 6. So it really was like once the technology caught up to the age where he could do it, obviously 1, 2, and 3 was made a reality.
I guess my question is if, let's say he waited until the 90s to create Star Wars. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine if he waited until the 90s to do that. Because that's what I'm saying. Like, even the most important decisions, whether, like, because I understood he did it like late 70s and then really kind of the early, kind of mid 80s in a sense. So, like, for me, you know, if he would have waited or if he would have done 1, 2, and 3 in the beginning and switched everything up, like, you know what I mean? Like, that, those are the kinds of things that I think about. Like, how would have all of really Star Wars would have changed, you know, in a sense, because all the casting, you would have had to redo everybody. You know, you would have had to do like so many different I feel like it probably would have never been the same effect if you were to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would have had the same popularity. I mean, when you're talking, you know, early 80s, I think people were already kind of semi interested in space. So that to have that kind of space opera being played out, like, I think obviously, you know, when you watch documentaries and stuff about Star Wars,
I mean, to me, I mean, it must have had some kind of.
Episode 4 was like, they never thought Star Wars was going to be a huge thing.
Well, no, what I'm trying to say is too is like I would have felt that, you know, George would have been probably more inspired by Star Trek in a sense, like because I feel like a lot of if Star Trek probably never existed, I guarantee you certain things, of course, probably never would have played out. Because I mean, you can say that, you know, Star Wars doesn't have some sort of a feel from, you know, Star Trek. I understand it's different in some ways, but like I feel like in some ways he got inspired because of this is just me. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I mean, I think there's a lot of space, you know, movies and stuff that are going on, but I think when you look at Star Wars, it is different in that, like, you can kind of get the almost kind of samurai feel to it, like with the lightsabers and the fighting.
No, I mean,
there is that kind of like, you know, the Force, the dark side, the light side. So you have that. I mean, religious pull to it.
I can see the whole samurai. I can see like the yin and yang, you know, kind of feeling behind it too. But I was just saying, like, if really, you know, if you look at Star Trek in a sense, I'm only saying that it had that similarities of having, you know, granted, we're not talking about Earth because we're talking about different planets, of course. And I mean, you can't really say that they're all, you know, humans because they're, you know what I mean? Like, then they're like, hey, we're all humans. Like, they're really not. They're just from different planets and they don't call themselves whatever. But, you know, I just look at it as like, you know, I feel like he would have done maybe some kind of inspiration from that in a sense, but of course changed it to make it, you know, what Star Wars is today.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if Star Wars went in line with more Star Trek, it would be a completely different project. And there's two school of thoughts because Star Trek is, and I'm sorry if you're a nerd. I'm a nerd too, and I do like Star Trek. But Star Trek is for nerds. It's for smart people.
Oh, it is. Hands down.
And Star Trek has that like intelligence behind it, where, you know, you have the teleporters, you have the technology, everything has, you know, a science behind it. With Star Wars, everything was mystical. Everything was, you know, the Force and kind of that religious, you know, it wasn't science, it was mystical.
No, I mean, and that's where I can agree. I'm just saying that, you know, in some ways, you know, and I'm going to say it like yes, Star Trek is, I would say, for your smarter individuals, right? I'm not saying, you know, Star Wars wasn't for, you know, really smart people, but, you know, in some ways I feel like it kind of dumbed it down a little bit. You know what I'm saying? In some ways, not everything, but I feel like it
I mean, there are certain areas where, you know, it does take, you know, some I would say some smarts to learn, you know, certain things, like especially when it comes to building lightsabers and knowing each individual part. Like, that's where you can kind of find that comparison to Star Trek, where the lightsabers have particular parts like the kyber crystals and the focusing lens, and, you know, you have those particular parts of a lightsaber, but for the most part, like, it's more, you look at Anakin's creation with the midichlorians and the Force and the good and the bad, and everything is from the Force and it flows through us and around us, and Star Trek's nothing about that.
No. I mean, like, that's why I'm saying, like, Star Trek was more, you're basically, it's a giant space military, right? And you're just, they're going from different planets or whatever to protect, the alliance of nations or whatever you want to call them. But I'm looking at like Star Wars as like, I guess in a similar way, but like their government is more ran by, in a sense, the Jedi were kind of the protectors / they were usually leaders in power in some regards, not always, but sometimes they might have like delegates or whatever the case is, right? And then they, of course, would have like, I'm thinking.
Well, they had their High Council.
Well, they had the High Council. Well, yeah, no, don't get me started about the High Council of Palpatine. Just saying.
Well, Palpatine wasn't in the High Council. He
No,
was
but
in the Senate.
The point is though, is that he's something else. But like or really, I would just say like Star Wars in general is like it kind of also reminded me of like, like when you think of like, like when you were talking about like light and darkness, right? And so, you used to think about like how in our lives, right? So as babies, right, we're innocent, right? We're basically pure. We're the purest as we can be because we don't know anything, right? We're just kind of like, we're here, whatever. But like in a sense, it's like if you start to learn about the Force and you start to learn it more, right? It pulls at you, right? So let's say you are going to be a Jedi, right? And you're working on that, but then all of a sudden, something else might happen in your life and you're starting to pull to the dark side a little bit. You're kind of going to that Sith side of the, the house. And so it kind of reminds me of like how, in general society, right? So you're like, our ultimate goal, of course, in maybe in life, I would hope, right, is you're trying to be as, I would say, as pure as possible, as best as you can. I mean, granted, we all make mistakes, but like you're trying to be light. You're trying to, you might have weak moments of darkness, so it's this constant pull of like how we deal with our kind of like everyday life. And so that was a nice, I feel like to me, like a nice little comparison on how, you can kind of relate to, how you could be a Jedi in a sense, or you could be a Sith. How do you, balance that out every day? Because that's similar to how you do with life, in a sense. So, the Force, like you said, it lives in through us, and there's things in our lives that, we can't ever explain. So it's kind of, so I mean, that kind of weird comparison, but like that's to me, as I would say, as humanly possible that you could try to get, some correlation to it, but.
Yeah, definitely. So getting back to George Lucas.
Oh, sorry. I'm glad I went on a tangent, but you couldn't go on one. Okay, whatever.
Getting back to George Lucas. So yeah, we did talk about how he created Star Wars. He held such a tight control over, everything did flow back to him. So, anybody that was creating ideas or toys, marketing, anything that had to do with Star Wars, all the ideas ultimately did go back to him, and he would decide what worked or didn't for Star Wars. So I think that's kind of what made it. I mean, I think you do have like kind of a 50-50, like it's good and it's bad at the same time, because you do have like this one person who's ultimately like in control and saying, no, that doesn't work, and being kind of maybe more closed off than.
Yeah. I mean, so like for me, it's like if Marvel was just, if it was Jack Kirby and Stan Lee or if it was just, let me rephrase that. If it was just Stan Lee, yeah, I feel like I would have an issue. But like, having those other people kind of come in and like, hey, they helped with other projects and they helped with, developing Marvel in a sense. But like in this case, I feel like he kind of needed somebody to kind of give like a checks and balances, like a little counteract, like, okay, is this right? Does this feel okay? You know what I mean? Because like, I don't think he really had that. I think he just, he made the idea and I don't think he had somebody to like, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? So he kind of just had to.
I mean, I'm sure there were people within his circle that he bounced ideas off of, but I don't think
it was like
what's different for Marvel is it wasn't just Stan Lee who created everything. Like there was Jack Kirby, there were other people. So, you have people that Stan Lee would have had to work with if that was the same case.
Well, right, but I'm just saying, like with Marvel, is like they already had a collective. Where I'm saying, George Lucas was the only person.
But I think
he was creating this whole universe. At the same time, though,
the other half of that is, with him having the sole creative kind of thought behind Star Wars, it kept that exclusiveness of it.
And
And
like you said, it was good to a point, but at the end of the day, having somebody to do that, it would have maybe helped a little bit more with the creative process down the road, in a sense, for
right.
me.
And so now, when he finally decided, like, I've had enough with Star Wars, I'm gonna sell it and retire and kind of do my own thing. In comes Disney.
Well, actually, I feel like you have something else to say. Like there's a little.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that after we talk about
Okay,
Disney,
my
because
bad.
that, it kind of relates to
Fair
the
enough.
conversation on Disney, because, like we've seen with Marvel,
Yeah.
of course, with Disney, now there's multiple hands in the pot. Whereas with 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, we saw George Lucas.
Right. That was his doing. Yes.
Now with 7, 8, and 9, that was not George Lucas.
No, but I will tell you this, and this is why I told you in the beginning. I did enjoy 7 a lot more than I did with 8 and 9, and the reason I'm saying this is, of course, that's why I did so well in the theaters. But I'm also saying story wise. I'm not saying that 8 was like like introducing basically Snoke. Was it Snoke?
Yeah.
Him and in the well, I'm not gonna go any further, but like in like 9, kind of getting that story kind of lined up in the way it was. I just don't think it would have, to me, like story. Sure, it would make sense. Like it's following the story of whatever was going on at that moment, but it kind of, and this is where I'm going to throw this out there, and I know you probably don't know a lot about it, and that's fine. But like, I kid you not, in Harry Potter, I know I'm going to say this once, okay? They had to create 2 movies. Okay, it was Deathly Hallows, part 1 and 2. Okay, part 1, they didn't do anything besides run around and ask people questions and do whatever. Like literally, it was boring as hell. Okay, movie was about 2.5 hours long, doing basically nothing. Okay, second part, all action. Of course, talking, and it was actually more theatrical. Like it was great. They could have shortened and they could have made it. But what I'm saying is like 8, unless there was a real story behind, some of that, I don't think it really gave a flying fuck personally. You could have probably easily condensed some of that and moved it into the other movie. If that was me, like if I was just looking at it as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, as far as like 7, 8, and 9, like I think 7 really did probably so well is because it was, honestly, it was like the first Star Wars movie in years. And
yeah.
people were really excited about it. And then once it came out, it was like, well, what is this shit?
Well, I mean, because now you're looking at an older, Harrison Ford, or really, Han Solo, right? And you're looking at Leia, who is now General, Leia and so forth. And then you're looking at, some new characters like Finn, and you're looking at, Rey, and you're looking at Poe, and all these other ones that are coming into play. But like, you're getting to see like the new generation of, who's taking over for really the, Leia and Solo, and then technically, Skywalker, really Luke in this case. I mean, we don't really get to know about Luke until later on, but like, you kind of get to see them as an older version of themselves, but it's nice to see that. But, now you're like, like, where's this going to go from here? And so like, of course, Rey's the protagonist, and she's like, trying to understand where she's coming from and so forth. And then, I'm sorry if you haven't seen it, I don't care anymore, but, Rey finds out way later on that she's a Palpatine, right? And then so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, I ruined it. Sorry, guys. If you haven't seen it, too bad. It's been out.
Yeah.
The point is like, you see all these characters kind of progress, and it was nice. But like, I mean, me personally, like having Snoke in there, like, okay, cool. Like, that's cool. They get to see somebody
Snoke
different,
really didn't. I mean, yeah, it didn't really drive the movie, but like, it didn't really play a role until 9 came out, because then you found out that Snoke really was,
a clone,
a Palpatine, kind of puppet. But
puppet clone, whatever you want to call him. But yeah,
I think the greater impact is like, you have these different directors, you have these different producers, you have different writers, and each of these different people now have different ideas for Star Wars. And we've seen this with Marvel, and we're seeing right now it's not working.
Well, and that's what I'm saying about like with Star Wars is that, certain people I can agree. Like I will tell you right now, Jon Favreau, have him on a lot of more shit for Star Wars. Hell, he can go on Marvel too while I'm at it too, because he can start directing some of that shit. But there has to be a certain kind of individual. Like Jon Favreau does an amazing job of directing, especially with Star Wars. Like he does an amazing job. Like let him keep it. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason to get rid of him, regarding a lot of those shows. But you're right. Having the too many mindset, like have too many chiefs, not enough Indians, or like the sheep in a sense. Like you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing, and then basically have the ones that can follow through with their idea, their vision, and whatnot. And so, when you have those too many, like let's say you have 10 people, like, oh, we got to decide on what we're gonna do next. No, you're gonna have one motherfucker who's gonna decide, and then you're going to have those ones who are leads for different, let's say the animation or whatever it is, right? The sound effect or whatever. Let them, be in charge of those little things, but like have one person be the overall lead and not.
I'm game for different people having different ideas, but like I think at the end of the day, and I'll say at the end of the day, because we do say that phrase a lot.
Yeah, we do.
But at the end of the day, I think when you look at Star Wars, there is a theme and there is a particular type of storytelling that exists. And when you have people that come in that don't quite understand what the Force is, and they come in and they go, hey, I think the Force should be 3 different gods. What are you smoking?
The god weed.
It obviously is the god weed.
The god weed. That's what they're smoking.
And you look at it. It's exactly what Disney is doing, and it's not just Marvel. It's across Disney as a whole.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the problem with now Disney is that they
so much less consistency and more quantity, and that's kind of like they're putting out a lesser quality product.
Well, because like I said, like
pump out quantity.
Well, so like I'll even say it, right? So, and I'll mention video games in this sense, right? Because we always like talking about video games. If Mass Effect, right? If like the first one, second one, third one, they all didn't come out in like 2 years apart. I know they came out and it was like a vast amount of time. There's a reason why that game as a whole, the trilogy wise, is a very great, amazing game, right? Just like we'll even say Last of Us or something like that. It took years before they made a new other one and did all that. So my point is, you want to make masterpieces, take the time. Like literally, I would say the minimum time that you should do, like sometimes, depending on what like projects you're working on, literally I'd say minimum is like 3, maybe 4 years. Like literally I'm not going to say wait 10 years, for the, for the next big one, but like, have a few years to really define that particular whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because just like Marvel, like they need to realize that, every year, I'd rather wait. Like hell, you know what? I'll even say it. I'd rather wait a couple years to have a good quality movie or TV show.
They need to slow the fuck down.
They do, yes. And what they need to do is have like you said, separate teams, like to work on certain things, and that's it. And then you will work on this and so forth. And just like Star Wars, you even just said it, like Acolyte hasn't even come out yet, and we already know that it's probably going to do shit.
We're going to get there. We're going to get to Acolyte. But I do remember, years ago, and I don't remember how many years ago.
It was probably around the time when they, bought.
It's probably around when Disney had bought Star Wars. But I do remember this meme, and it was a billboard. I don't know if it was a real billboard, if it was photoshopped, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But it was a picture of George Lucas, and he was sitting, I'm assuming, in his office, and he was basically in his chair laughing hysterically. And the caption underneath was, "Do you miss me yet?" And I think at the time it was like, I mean, not really, because you haven't really been gone that long. You know what I mean?
Right. And now you're.
And I just saw it again, like, I think maybe last week.
You should have sent it to me, man. I mean, I would have loved to see it.
I literally was thinking to myself, yeah, I think we're about to. If we don't already, I think we're about to like really miss like how exclusive and how tight knit Star Wars was, because Star Wars was never just about pumping out content or like how many people were involved in making a product. I mean, if you look at, and I love Mandalorian, like I think it's a great show,
Absolutely.
but if you look at how many different directors made each individual episode, I think they had like 4 or 5 different people making each individual episode,
All I'm going to say, and
going back and forth each episode.
I keep telling you, like Jon Favreau should have been the only one to do that. He should have been the only one to direct the entire show. It doesn't matter, like, and I've been noticing. It's not even just. I feel like this is a television thing that they keep doing. This is in a lot of TV shows that they will have different. They'll have the actor, the main actor in the show, direct a freaking episode in like a TV show or in whatever. And I'm like,
and I can see it. I can see
to
it
a
here.
degree. I can see it. They were
to a degree.
Like if they're doing it for the first time, sure, maybe you can do one for like the last episode or something like that. But like you doing it like every other episode or whatever the case is, like no, like you have a director. You listen to what he's saying, or she, or whoever, right? And you're going to listen to whatever they're directing. Where they're going to in that moment, right? And so like you look at how Mandalorian has done in the last 3 seasons. It's a great TV show overall, and it's been that way, and that's the reason why with Star Wars, like once they made that TV show, they're like, it's the best one that they've come out with, plain and simple.
And I think what makes it good is Dave Filoni, because the directors ultimately go through Dave Filoni for that creative control for the show.
Well, I mean, and like I said, with Jon Favreau, it seems like those two are really tight knit, and they get along, and they don't see that they're like, there's not really many differences between the both of them. They clearly have the same vision.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're trying to interpret 2 different ways of doing all this stuff.
And that's where I think that vision stays the same. But you're looking at George, and that meme is him just laughing in a chair, and it's funny, but like, when we look at the Acolyte TV show that's going to be coming out, it's going to fail because of how they are going about making it.
So, you know what? So I saw something in here that I know you're going to probably mention a little bit more. So if you were to create a TV show, okay, I know you're going to have your notes on this, of course. What exactly would you create in Star Wars? Like if you were to like one of the ones right now to create anything in Star Wars, what would be something that you think that would be a hit? Like right now, if you had to because me personally, I would say if you did something on Yoda and like kind of learn about like the origins of him or something like that. I know people have said like in the past that, having a backstory on him or maybe his people and like, or how he came to be or whatever. Like that's where I would feel like that would be an interesting story to kind of see where he's been and other people and so forth. But like
anything within the Old Republic, that's where I'd go, because one, there's been so much already with what's already been made, like between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Clone Wars, Rebels, Resistance. There's been so much already around that one timeline that we don't need any more content in that timeline.
So basically you do a prequel to the prequel.
So I would go all the way back, and I go back to Knights of the Old Republic video game.
Of course.
With Darth Revan and all of those types of characters, because that time frame, the Sith and the Jedi both existed.
I mean, so that's why I'm asking, is because like I would agree with you. It's kind of like how in, I wouldn't say all movies, but like the Kingsman, right? So you like, I know it's gonna be random, but like how like you saw the first one and the second one, and then they went back and they did like a prequel to like how they became to be and so forth. That's the same idea that I could agree with you, is like go back to where the origin or like the roots of everything, and
create
then
a new story. Don't keep doing the same damn characters. Like, we don't need to know any more about the Skywalkers.
Listen, I don't
We
need to know
don't
it.
need to know any. I mean, granted, yes, we could probably have, I would say, a TV show, not a movie, but a TV show based on Yoda.
Hell,
I would do one probably on Vader, because that would be a cool TV show.
No, I can agree. I was also going to say I really don't need to know any more about Jar Jar Binks unless we find out that he's a Sith.
I
mean,
would probably do one on Palpatine.
When he became
Met, Pelagus, and became who he became ultimately by episode 1, I would do a lot of those shows. But if it was me creating a TV show, I would go all the way back to the Old Republic and create something completely new characters people haven't ever seen, haven't ever heard of, and create something brand new.
because then theoretically is like if you started from like the origin and then you worked your way up, that could take years. You could have literally a long lineage of all these things. Granted with Lucas, granted he only had the 1 through 9 ideas. He never really. I'm not saying he didn't have the ideas for TV shows and stuff. Granted, that was more of a Disney thing more than anything. Disney really wanted to do the TV shows and did all that, that side shit, basically what they're doing now. But with his idea, it was just like, okay, here's the core base. This is what we're going to do. But I feel like, and I know this is where I know we're going to have a lovely chat about this a few weeks from now, regarding like canon versus non-canon stuff. But if you looked at like the books originally that he wrote, that literally could be source material for like your idea of the Old Republic, the Knights of the Old Republic, because like that literally could transfer over to that in a sense.
Well, and that's where, when 7, 8, and 9 came out, that changed a lot of what was canon and not canon, because that took a lot of what used to be canon out of that. And then here we are with Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, especially Ahsoka, that is slowly bringing things back into what is canon.
Right, but like that's what I'm saying now is like it's if you went back to, like you said, the we'll say the early days of the original Star
early
Wars
days
theory.
of the Jedi, where if you look at the Empire now, you have kind of the clone troopers, or the stormtroopers.
Right.
In the Old Republic, those were Sith. The basically military of that time was the Sith.
Interesting.
And there were actual Sith lords that there weren't just 2, there were more.
So, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's where I would feel that if you're going to do a TV show or something like that, like that's where I would honestly go to.
It is a very, very cool time frame to do a movie or even TV shows, because there's so much you can do in that time.
Yeah, kind of moving.
And then here we are with the Acolyte TV show, John.
Oh no!
So you asked me that question, so I'll ask you a question.
Oh great, here we go.
If you were doing a TV show for Star Wars, what kind of writers do you think you would hire for this show? Do you think you would hire writers that knew something about Star Wars or knew absolutely nothing?
See, man, I'm gonna give you my personal answer, and then I'm gonna give you an answer that I feel like would resolve everything. Ready? So I'm gonna give you the one that would resolve everything first. Okay,
I know this answer.
Ready? Chat GPT.
Yeah.
No, for real. If you want to get technical, shit, I'd rather go trust an AI at this point than half the fucking people that want to do all this shit. Because if they have no idea on, basically, kind of looking at your notes here, but like the lore, the overall like presence of like Star Wars as a whole. If you don't know anything about really Star Wars in general, like, what gives you the fucking right to sit there and start writing shit down and being like, yep, I think, like you said, like the Godweed I was just talking about, like, what makes you fucking think that you're going to have 3 gods that are controlling the fucking Force? No, it's a fucking you can't see it, right? You can't see this shit. It's there, okay? And like, like lightsabers and shit. Like if you're telling me, you know, I think you could smoke the crystals. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, no, you're like, you can't do that. Like you die instantly. Like the whole point of a crystal is to allow you to, have like anyways, the point is like, when I'm looking at people, it's like, if you're going to have a bunch of fucking morons who have no idea on what the fuck they're talking about, I would rather do it fucking AI and be like, here you go. Here's a better script than these fucking morons that, didn't even want to, write this shit down. But like,
so I'll tell you, the Acolyte TV show, Leslie Headland, who, if you don't know who she is most known for creating raunchy comedies.
The question is which ones?
She had brought on writers who knew nothing about Star Wars.
And see, this is where I would fire her. And I would be like, you're a moron. And this is where I would say, you need to go either watch this shit or you can get off the fucking set and you don't have to have any right to do this. Now, again, yes, I would have people who actually knew about Star Wars. Just like I said, the reason why The Last of Us did so fucking well is because they brought in the actual people who did the damn video game and everything else in there, and they understood the story.
Yes.
There was no fucking reason why you shouldn't do the same thing. If you haven't read, in this case, the books or whatever, basically anything regarding
even watch the movies, but
anything.
I am the same way. Like I would want to hire writers who, one, know about Star Wars, but not just know, but have a passion for it. The lore, the characters,
and can bring,
and on top of that, have a high respect for the original creator, George Lucas. And I'm sorry, but when you look at Leslie Headland, like she has actually come out and called George Lucas a misogynist.
Oh, interesting.
Like in an interview. And it's like, how is he, what part of like episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 makes him a misogynist when you have female queens and you have a character like Leia,
right, who goes against everything regarding what she's supposed to be as a princess,
right?
And think about what she became in 7, 8, 9. She's a general, like she became a military leader, really for the rebel resistance in a sense, but like she became a lot more than that. So like that's why
she wouldn't be making this show if it wasn't for what George Lucas did.
Well, and that's
and then she calls herself a super fan. It's like,
no,
are you really a super fan? But like, it's one of those things. Like she said that she wants the Star Wars universe to have more female and queer representation because it's important to her as a super fan.
Okay, see, and this is where I'm going to say this is the whole woke movement of the like we've been talking about. I understand. Listen, I'm going to say this. I do not care whether you are straight, by whatever the hell you are. Okay, it's just a general statement. Okay, but I understand you want to represent, you want to do certain things. I get that, but at the end of the day, if somebody wrote this shit down, okay, and they basically laid it all out for you, and you want to start changing every fucking thing on the planet, why is my first question, and then secondly, what makes you think that you know everything about the whole idea of literally what George Lucas was doing from literally day one when he wrote this shit down on a piece of paper? Did he say, you know what? I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to make sure that everybody is a different race, different gender, a different whatever, different orientation, whatever the hell it was at the time. I'm going to say it. Like back in the time of when he was probably writing this, he probably wasn't thinking of half the shit. He was just thinking, okay, I'm going to write this shit down. I'm going to have the characters in mind. I'm going to do all this stuff. Like, I understand you want to change certain things, but it's just like, again, I'm going to mention Marvel, okay? You don't need to change every fucking detail of every little goddamn thing because it's already been written for you. You don't need to change the whole narrative. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can understand certain things, but you don't need to have the whole kit and caboodle will be like, you know what? We're going to change the whole damn story. And then you wonder why. Then you're going to wonder why this is where Disney's, making this big mistake. They're like, well, why are we making these movies? Like, why aren't they getting hits or whatever? It's because the quality of the damn movie or the quality of these TV shows. If you're not having people that actually give a fuck, Do you think anyone's going to really give a fuck if they watch it?
And people aren't going to watch it. I mean, yes. Could Star Wars use, more female representation? I'm sure it probably could.
I'm not saying
But
it shouldn't.
It's one of those things, and I've said it, I'm sure, numerous times now, especially with Marvel. It should never be about replacement.
No.
It should be more inclusion, and it's become more about exclusion.
No, you know what?
And that's the problem is like, one, for females, males, whatever. I mean, Chewbacca's a furry. Who cares? It doesn't really matter, but like you should not be replacing females over males.
No.
You should not be replacing males over females. Like you should be including. And the thing with the queer representation, at the end of the day, there should be like a Bing or something. I feel like there should be a Bing. At the end of the day, like, does it really freaking matter whether the character is gay? Like when I'm watching 7, 8, and 9, the last thing I'm thinking of is, God, I really hope Poe is gay.
No, I mean, no. What I was trying to tell you earlier,
but you know what I mean, right? Like,
no, I do. What I'm about to say is like,
I really hope in future projects there's more queer representation and stuff. Like, that's not like anything that we're thinking of.
No, what you said earlier about the inclusion and seclusion, like literally that was basically the best words you could have said. I mean, I could have said that too, but that it's like I needed to say that because it was getting to the point where I agree. Like, there's no reason to. It's almost like segregating literally everything that, everything that's been going on. There's no reason for half the shit that everything is, being done the way it is, and so at the end of the day, it's like, Star Wars, Marvel, whatever.
Society preaches that word equality, but then they remove men.
Well, but it's like you're segregating the whole.
That's
picture.
not equality. That's just exclusion. You're excluding one to put in another, and
right.
It's not. What's fair for one is fair for another.
Like, right. The true meaning of equality, it literally, nothing matters as long as everyone gets literally a slice of the pie at the end of the day. Like, they're the ones, like, if I'm sitting at the table with you right now, then hopefully you and I will split it 50-50, right? Now, if there's like, let's say 50 people, hopefully, you're going to get a little sliver of, whatever, but at least you're getting something. Instead of like, well, I'm going to get, 25% of this, you're going to get about 10%. And then where everyone else has like this little tiny, like crumb, basically, coming off the pie. No, that's not how that works. I mean, that's not, like I said, equality.
Yeah. I mean, being one that like, I like to tell a good story, and I've always, being one that does a lot of graphic design and does a lot of creative things. When I look at like, more female or queer representation, I have to go back to, how does that add to your story for that TV show?
Is there a purpose?
Is there a purpose for more female representation over men? Is there a purpose in the old Republic, which is what this is set in, for queer representation in Star Wars when, honestly, sexuality hasn't been a theme? I mean, you can say, like, well, Han Solo was kind of a player. Big deal. He hit on a few women. That's not saying like he was, sexual.
I mean, technically, Luke almost had a thing with his sister, not even knowing it. But that's a different story.
I mean, it's not like he knew.
No, right. I'm just saying no. But I mean, like, at the end of the day, it's like,
But again, it was a kiss. It wasn't like he grabbed her ass and was like, "Hey, like, let's go in the back room." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
no,
we're talking queer representation, like.
No, like if you look right, if all
it
the
wasn't
movies,
like they're walking around going, "Hey, I'm straight. I like women." Like, like
no, right. But I mean, if like you look at technically like Anakin, right, having both Luke and Leia at the time in the the third movie, like kind of establishing that storyline. It's like, okay, well, you're right. That's biologically speaking, that's how you would create your babies, right? And unfortunately, like it's not like, oh well, no, there's going to be 2 gay men, and we're gonna raise this kid off our own.
But even still, I mean, we know that they got married at the end of episode 2. We know that she was pregnant, but they still didn't put an emphasis on them having sex. Like it wasn't an emphasis because
It happened, and that was what it was.
Sex and gender was not a big deal with the Star Wars universe, and it's not a big deal in Marvel. So I don't know why it's a big deal, other than the people that want that to be represented.
I mean, technically, and I mean, well, Marvel has done, certain things to represent, the LGBTQ community in a sense, but
and I always filter
no.
what's the purpose.
Right, and
If
that's
it
what I'm
serves
saying.
a purpose, and you can tell me legitimately, well, this is the purpose. Hey, that's great.
That's awesome. But
That's
in the
awesome.
story.
End of story. But if you can't tell me what the purpose of queer representation, other than the fact that Leslie Headland is queer, and I'm just saying it because that's what she said.
No, again, I think at the end of the day, like he says, we like to say that it should matter. I mean, literally, like we said about Star Wars, when we're going to go over some of the other episodes and stuff down the road, I guarantee you're not going to find anything regarding the representation. So I get it, with the whole Acolyte thing, it's going to be probably one of the worst TV shows that Disney's probably ever created.
I mean, it would be the same of saying if I were to create a TV show, me being a Christian, right?
Yep.
I want to have more Christian representation.
Oh, there'd be a huge uproar. Absolutely. I guarantee you a lot more people would be like, why? What about Muslim? What about Buddhism? What about Kwanzaa? I mean, not Kwanzaa. I don't know why I said Kwanzaa.
But it's
that representation,
It's
though.
because I personally am a Christian, and I'm putting my own view on Star Wars because I want Star Wars to have that Christian representation.
Well, I mean,
and it's the same thing that Leslie Headland is doing.
No, I agree. So I'm going to throw this out there too. So think about it. So when they did the whole 3 God thing, regarding the Force, now if you really want to get technical, that means it's polytheistic now. It's not monotheistic. That means, then you can be like, well, hold on a minute. Why are we throwing in gods into the picture regarding this?
That was actually Dave Filoni, because that was in Clone Wars and Rebels. But anyways,
no, I'm just
where we're going.
I understand, that, but I'm just saying.
One of the last things that she said, and I think this is probably the worst thing, other than what we were just talking about, is that she is not worried about losing or dividing the Star Wars fan base when it comes to this show.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now. There's going to be a reason why that show, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to say this. Acolyte will probably be the worst show, at least for Star Wars wise, that they've ever created, if that's how it's going to be. Because I've seen the trailer for it too. I mean, great. You know what? I'm not going to lie. Graphics are great. But does it mean it has a great story?
The graphics were great, but I wasn't thrilled with the trailer, to be honest.
No, but what I'm saying is, like you said, if graphics are great, does it have a story? Does it have a purpose? Does this actually relate to something that is supposed to be, hopefully, down the road? Does this relate to things that actually make sense in the Star Wars universe? That's all the questions that we don't have right now are really the answers. But it's like, at the end of the day, is it going to be really worth our time? And I'm probably going to say no. It's probably not. It's going to be like the Eternals of, Star Wars.
Yeah,
it's just going to be like.
I just think when you actually look up videos of Leslie Headland, and I highly suggest anybody listening to this, all 7 of you,
really, Jeff, but it's okay.
Go on YouTube and actually put in Leslie Headland Acolyte interviews. And you can actually see what she says about the show and how she created it in interviews. And it's just horrendous. She has no respect for George Lucas. And she calls herself a super fan, but I seriously doubt that she has any respect for Star Wars other than really just doing a show. And it's really sad. I mean, not worried about losing or dividing Star Wars fans when it comes to her show, that's just not very respectful to a fan base of millions of people.
I mean, kind of getting to our, kind of ending point of this is
there is a positive note.
Yes, the only positive thing really, besides Leslie Headland doing her thing right now, is, again, we've talked about Dave Filoni. If Dave Filoni didn't if he wasn't the Kevin Feige of Star Wars, okay. Now I have no idea where the hell Star Wars would be at right now, and I sure as shit wouldn't know how it would do without his at least vision / knowledge of how it should be now.
So I don't know if you knew this, but this is kind of the last bullet point. But when George Lucas was still in charge of Star Wars, this is before Disney even came into the picture.
Okay.
George Lucas actually hired Dave Filoni to do an animated show, which became the Clone Wars.
Oh, interesting.
So Dave Filoni has been
With George
doing Star Wars. And I mean, he's done Clone Wars, Rebels, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, Bad Batch. Like, he's been involved with Star Wars for a very, very long time.
So I guess the question is, was the Clone Wars, was it ever a part of, was it Disney that originally created the Clone Wars? Like the TV show wise, like the animated stuff?
I don't know the answer to that.
I'd be curious because I don't know. Because like if Disney did create it, you know what I mean? Then technically Dave has been around since, probably a little before. It was like probably a little before, George decided to sell it. You know what I mean?
So officially, it's produced by Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm Animation.
Okay,
and it was distributed by Warner Brothers.
Oh, the rival. Disney's rival. I did not know that. Okay, so that was before. So it came out in what, 2008?
2008.
And you got look up the whole acquisition from Disney, because I'm curious to know when that like happened. I think it was like I don't know if it was like a few years later or something like that, but like I think that George Lucas, with his ultimate wisdom, I mean, he probably was being asked. I know he probably was asked by Disney quite a bit, but I knew he was really kind of hesitant on it at first.
Officially October 30th, 2012.
All right, so it was 4 years later. So like he already
Disney agreed to buy Lucasfilm for $4.05 billion.
I told you it was a few $1 billion so this guy does not have to work for the rest of his life. That's what I'm saying. But like, okay, so in 2012, so that means he already distributed probably a few seasons of the Clone Wars at that time. I don't know how many seasons there are of the Clone Wars to be exact, but like,
well, and they own Indiana Jones too.
Well, wait, what, Disney?
Yeah.
Okay, so that must have been the acquisition part of it because of that. Okay. Anyways, so I mean, that makes sense. So like the fact that it was 2012, it makes sense that why Dave Filoni in this case was, the right choice, to be in that role and should be, the one doing it, because like if he wasn't really working with George Lucas at that time, and then, let's say 4 years later during the acquisition then was hired.
So he initially was executive VP, and then just recently he became creative operations officer, which he has creative control basically over every project that Star Wars does.
Then he really should look at the Acolyte.
I seriously hope that he did, because I know when I looked at an interview that he did, he had stated that he would be brought in after projects were already developed. So the input that he would give really didn't go anywhere because projects were already developed, like actors were hired, things were already in motion. And now he's much more involved in the inception phase, where he has direct control over how they're being done.
I'm only saying this because if Acolyte is the way it is right now, and they're about to release it, they really might want to rethink a lot of their shit, because it's going to look like it.
And I don't know if he took over the role after this show is already developed.
If it is, then this is going to be a giant shit.
It's going to be a giant poop. Yeah.
Really?
It's going to be that shit in a bag that somebody drops on somebody's doorstep and lights on fire and then rings the bell and runs away.
That's exactly what, or basically it's going to need to stay in the vault for the rest of the time. Like that's just the way it's going to be. But I mean,
it's going to bomb. I mean, it's going to be awful. But I mean, Dave Filoni is the kind of the golden boy right now of Star Wars. And I think future movies and future shows will definitely have his handprint on it, because shows like Mandalorian and Ahsoka, they're great shows because, he has that direct vision from George Lucas. And one, he actually respects George Lucas's vision for Star Wars.
I think really at the end of the day, if Dave Filoni stays on, just like Kevin Feige is for, Marvel in a sense, I'm just hoping that with the future of Star Wars moving forward, if he royally fucks up, it's going to be a major blowout down the road when it comes to like future projects.
I mean, I don't see him messing up that bad.
No. I'm just saying because if Acolyte has anything to say right now, and if I'm hoping that if it was after he became the creator of our operations, I understand. But if it was during, then that's something else, man. I'm just gonna say it right now.
I mean, I'm hoping there's something that he might see in the show that doesn't quite line up, and he can fix before it comes out. But I'm not really looking forward to it.
I would say the only last thing we should talk about is so if you guys ever wanted to watch, if you haven't really watched Star Wars, then you're missing out. But I would say if you're going to watch it, of course, we talked about it a little before the episode so Disney has a thing where, just like with Marvel, it has a chronological order of how you should watch all of the Star Wars in order, in that sense, all the TV shows, all the movies, whatever else.
Yeah.
Right. We have a list. I'm not going to go over that list because there's a lot of like in betweens. It's like, we got this season, and then we got another season down the road. And then it's like, we got to go jump around, and it's kind of a mess. I'm just going to say it. Like, you'd have to watch certain things first, and then you have to, go back and forth a little bit. And then, like you were talking about Clone Wars being, first few seasons are like chronological, and then it's like, okay, the next, few seasons after that are like back and forth and like this and that.
Yeah, they go back and forth. I mean, the timeline is kind of general. So, I mean, I'll go through it, John.
You're going to go through it.
I'll go through it. So the first kind of early saga, which was, kind of I think George Lucas dubbed it as the tragedy of Darth Vader, which is...
That's basically what it was, yeah.
Basically what it is. So you got episode 1, episode 2, then you have Clone Wars.
The animated.
And episode 3, and then the brand new animated show, which is The Bad Batch. After Bad Batch is Solo. Obi-Wan, which is the newer show. Rebels, which is an animated show. Andor, which is, again, a newer Disney show. Rogue One, which is, I believe, like an hour or so before episode 4 happens.
Yeah, well, kind of, because I think it was so it like ends right when 4 really begins.
Yeah, it's within the hour of 4 like happening.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Then from after Rogue One, you have 4, 5, and 6. And then you have another animated show called The Resistance,
which is actually a kid's show, just so you know.
It's actually a kid's show. Then you have Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and then 7, 8, and 9.
And then that's why, with Matt and I talking about, we didn't talk about Acolyte because, again, it hasn't come out yet, but it is supposed to happen, of course, well before, episode 1 and everything.
Many years.
Many years, yeah. Right. And so, that's kind of why, when we were talking about the TV shows and stuff, yes, we would rather see a show that is way before the time of really the main core Star Wars, what we know really today. But, moving forward, yes, this whole month is really, as you can tell, going to be Star Wars related stuff. So I know next week, we'll be talking more about the, episodes 1 through 3 and then kind of the in-betweens of all that stuff. And then, of course, down the road, my favorite, I feel like, is going to be the ultimate debate between canon versus non-canon. I only say this because I've been waiting for these two to come on the show, especially together. I know Matt's like, I think this is a bad idea. But I'm like, dude,
if you've ever wanted to hear the F word, that'll be the episode to listen to.
I was hold on. Really? I said it a few times. You haven't said anything. You just say frickin' every 2 seconds, but it's fine. I'll say it for you. I'll be your angry translator for the episodes moving forward.
Oh, well, between your dad, your brother, and you, that episode, it'll be every third word.
Well, okay. We'll try to keep it to a minimum, but we'll see. But anyways, guys, we love everything you guys been doing. Jeff, keep emailing us, man. I love hearing all about the fun times that you're having with us, talking and whatnot. And again, till next time.
Stay geeky.